Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth the people walk upon. We are the land. How do we sell our mother? How do we sell the stars? How do we sell the air? Crazy horse, we hear what you say. Too many people standing their ground, standing the wrong ground. Predator's face, he possessed a race. Possession, a war that doesn't end. Children of God, feed on children of earth. Days people don't care for people. These days are the hardest. Material fields, material harvest. Decoration on chain that binds. Mirrors gold. The people lose their minds. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth the people walk upon. We are the land.
Aquaba. Greetings. Hello. Happy Sunday or whichever day it is when you're viewing this. We welcome you sincerely to this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by none other than the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. We hope you're reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. And we're so excited that you have decided to join us today to participate in this critically important topic, the unknown contributions of Sekou Odinga. The unknown contributions of Sekou Odinga, a serious warrior in our African liberation struggle, one who has, you won't find a lot of written literature about comrade ancestor Sekou Odinga, who made his physical transition in January of this year. But if you know of the Black Panther Party, if you know of the Black Liberation Army, if you're familiar with Assata Shakur and her liberation from prison in 1979 and her living to this day free in socialist Cuba, then you have to understand and know about the contributions of Sekou Odinga, because a lot of that is largely the result of his contributions. So we're honored and excited to talk about this ancestor today, and we're glad that you're here to join us for that. We give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We talked about last week how, these people want to give them, make a big deal out of this past Monday here in this hemisphere. And I think I was talking to an indigenous work colleague, and this person told me that their daughter, who's 17, said, now that it's no longer it's not Columbus Day, but she said now that it's no longer a white people's holiday, now we got to go to school. Now that it's deemed Indigenous Peoples Day, and I think from that mindful 17-year-old, they really capture the essence of the contradiction. Nobody wants your damn holidays. The indigenous people want their land back. How about that? That's how you correct the problem. So we stand with them in that. And we also, of course, recognize our African ancestors. We want our land back too. And the only land that we have any justifiable rights to is Africa. So we want our land back, and we honor our ancestors like Sekou Odinga, who gave their lives, literally, to participate in our struggle for Chimurenga, struggle for justice, right? So we're glad that you can join us. We start, as we always do, just by introducing who we are, as a reminder for those that know, and introduction for those that don't. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, Pan-African political party with our base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we correctly define as one unified socialist Africa. And our work to bring about Pan-Africanism is outlined in clear detail in Kwame Nkrumah's landmark book, The Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And in that book, he lays out the strategy to achieve revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And we have spent all of our waking hours working as hard as we can to make that strategy a reality. And over the last several years, we have made great strides in that strategy. And it'll be just wonderful to see the fruits of that begin to show themselves even more and more, as they are today, as we speak. And our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by two AAPRP organizers, myself, Ajamu, and Shakura, who just happens to be my biological and ideological daughter. So let's get us started. The unknown contributions of Sekou Odinga. And to get us started, I will hand it over to Shakura.
Thank you. Appreciate you, comrade. Greetings, everyone. So we are really, really fortunate to have such a comrade who was unequivocally willing to sacrifice his time, his energy, his efforts, his courage, so that so many of us could be able to exist in a world where there is still struggle, but things are definitely in a more progressive method, I'll say, compared to where they were at that time in the world. Sekou had so many contributions that we're really just not aware of. And thankfully, we have organizations like the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We have comrades such as Ajamu and others who are doing the research so that they can increase their political education to shed light through those organizations about what these folks have done for our struggle. Not just African struggle, but indigenous struggle, Asian descent struggle, even our comrades in Ireland and the Irish socialist struggle. Sekou has done some things throughout time that we're going to talk about today that have allowed all of us to have more of an understanding of names like Marilyn Buck and even names like Assata Shakur because of the work that Sekou has done. And so I think it's extremely important that we think more and more about not only how can we amplify and uplift these voices, specifically of comrades such as Sekou, where the conversation is not happening as much, but how can we increase our education even more than that? How do you take it a step further after this seminar is over? We've talked over and over again about ways that you all could support the Pan-Africanist struggle. We've talked about how you could join an organization that's working for justice, or maybe even figure out a way to support a Pan-Africanist organization that's working for justice. If you're not able to support financially, maybe you can support by offering your paper and your ink. We've given so many examples of that. And last week I started this challenge where I'm really encouraging folks who want to do more and who are currently trying to figure out what that next step looks like, for you to select one action per month for the remainder of this year, one action per month. So maybe, just maybe, you can try to find some information, some literature that has been written on Sekou Odinga. And after this seminar, you can find more of an opportunity to dig into a deeper rabbit hole so that you can become more connected with what this comrade has done. As Comrade Ajamu has already said, or I'm sure he will say at some point in the seminar tonight, we only have but so much time. So it's not necessarily up to us to teach you about this comrade. It's really up to you to take responsibility on how much more you want to grow your brain and learn about this comrade, right? And the hour that we've given is only but so much time, but no one said that the learning had to stop after this seminar was over. So we strongly encourage you to continue to build up what that looks like for you. And as we said before, maybe you can find a way to enlighten someone else. Maybe you can find a way to educate someone else. Maybe you can find a way to support the organization that Sekou Odinga was a part of. Whatever that looks like for you, you all, we have a responsibility to do that. And you might be bombarded by the distractions of any election. But if you live in the diaspora in the US, you might be distracted by the election commercials and ads and things that are playing. But make no mistake, African people are still resisting in every part of the world. Shout out to our comrades in Haiti. We are with you. We stand with you. Shout out to our comrades in Palestine. We are with you. We stand with you. Shout out to anyone who is experiencing oppression at this point in time. And because of that, we see you, we stand with you, and we are with you. Make no mistake, the situations that people are dealing with every single day are getting worse. Do not confuse the fact that things seem to be getting better with none of that. Just because you're not hearing about as many police shootings does not mean they're not happening. Just because you're not hearing about as many African trans people who are being kidnapped or abducted does not mean it's not happening. Just because you're not hearing about other inhumane situations, like how people are being abused or how they're being tortured as we speak, specifically political prisoners who were not in any space and time supposed to be arrested, but because the FBI needed someone to blame, now they're being at the brunt of that. Just because you're not hearing about that stuff does not mean it's not happening. So make no mistake, we are still under attack. We have always been under attack, and our comrades are under attack, and they will continue to be under attack just as long as we are under attack, because everything has always been about control of land, and that is still the fighting cause for today. You, however, have a responsibility to now change that circumstance in some way, shape, or form. And it really does start with each and every one of us. So we all need to take an idea to think more about what we can do. And we all need to decenter our individual beliefs, because this is why we should be increasing our political education and essentially joining an organization that's working for justice. But even if you're not ready to join the organization, as I said, at least still getting more credible information available to you, intercepting that, consuming that kind of information so that you can start to really decenter all the lies and the propaganda that is currently existing, so that you have a better idea of why this information is so rare and also why it's hidden from us. This is why we need to take it upon ourselves to do more research, because if we don't know what our ancestors have done for us, that might be part of the issue as to why some of us don't think we're connected to our ancestors. It may also be a reason as to why we don't really believe that we have the ability to change the circumstances. I think if anyone should convince you otherwise, it should be the people in Palestine, the people in Haiti. It should even be our comrades in Australia and other comrades who are fighting all around the world because they are tired and they want a better change and they want a better outcome. That should not make you sad when you read news reports about that. Of course, for the comrades who have passed on and their lives were sacrificed, we acknowledge that and we give a moment of silence for them. But we should feel motivated above anything else that these people literally died so that there could be a better outcome. And just because they're fighting in Palestine doesn't mean you in Sacramento or you in England or you in Miami or you in Canada are not benefiting from their sacrifices in Palestine. It does not mean that. If anything, this should have taught us that we are all connected, you all. We are all connected. Our choices, our responsibilities, our sacrifices, our humanity, it's all connected. So we should feel extremely motivated when we see the people of Haiti marching. We should feel extremely motivated when we think about the work that is being done and how people are showing up and showing us their fiercelessness and why they're resisting. And we'll tell you why they're resisting. Next slide, please. They are resisting because they understand that the best way that they can make the action that it is they want to make is they have got to commit to their principles. And because they're committed to their principles, resistance is the only way to deal with the oppressor, because the oppressor is going to stop at nothing, to try to compromise you and to try to make you go against your principles. The worst thing that capitalism can deal with is people who are committed to doing the right thing by any means necessary. That is the biggest threat for capitalism. And usually what happens is when you see people stand up and commit to their principles in any type of media, what usually happens? When we see people who are saying, I'm not going to do this, and there's nothing you can say to make me change my mind, what happens? The first thing that'll happen is the person who's trying to persuade them to do differently will say, I'll give you $5. Or I'll give you $500. Name your price. What's your price? And money's no object for me. Name your price. Because that's always a converter. That's always a converter, where people who stand for their principles will fall at the height of getting money. They will fall at the height of it. That's why people are making such a big deal about Africans getting reparations, in California and other such locations. That's why this is such a big topic, you all, because so many folks are like, oh, what happened to Africans was wrong. It was wrong. And I'll never bow down. I'll never bow down. And then as soon as California says, well, we're thinking about adding reparations, they're like, oh, okay, well, I could do something with that check. That'd be really cool for me and my ancestors. Are you serious? For you and your ancestors are not alive. That's not what they would have wanted. They died so that you could continue on and live out all of the unethical things that happened, all of the inhumane things that happened. They don't want you to just forget all of that after you get a $400 check or $4,000 check, because that money will be gone in 12 seconds. It doesn't matter how much it's worth. You can't erase 500 plus years of inhumanity, of exploitation, of land theft, of inconsented sexual abuse. You can't sign away money for that. You can't put a price on that. There's no way you'd be able to put a price on it, because if you did, then the circumstances that are currently existing for African people would not be as hard. They would not be as challenging for us if it were that easy to name a value and a price to it. That's why you can't sell us out, and that's why you can't buy us out. So we ask you all to think more deeply about what that means to commit to your principles, because at the end of the day, it's all you've got. It is all you've got. You don't have anything else. Your principles are you. You are your principles. So when you are displaying things that violate your principles, imagine why people are confused and why you're more likely to lose their respect. This is what that boils down to. I am not a parent. I have no right to judge people who have given birth to children. And that's not what I'm about to do with this next statement. I am, however, a concerned community member, and I am a person who cares about people's safety because I truly believe in a socialist public health environment. And I want all people to be healthy by any means necessary under a socialist frame. So the other day, I'm walking my dog and I see this parent who's driving with the child in the front seat who probably could have benefited from being in a car seat, but this is me judging, so I'm stepping back on that. And I see the parent is clearly texting while they're driving. What's concerning to me is obviously this is a safety issue above all else, but above all of that, the toddler is watching this parent doing this action. So we shouldn't be surprised when 16, 18, 21 years from now, the toddler is driving and they are now doing the same thing, right? My point I'm making, you all, is that we have got to commit to our principles. And if your principal is texting while driving, just understand that your children are watching you. Understand that you are modeling for them what is appropriate behavior. You are defining for them what is okay to do and what is not okay to do. And so, if you are to practice that you believe that these principles need to be ethical, they need to be rooted in humanity, whatever that looks like for you, then that means you are willing to die on the fact that you believe in that. And I can hope and pray that after you all send the messages that you need to send while you're driving, you will put that phone away and display a different action for that child. So that child understands that when you have such a big responsibility, such as driving, that is an opportunity for you to focus wholeheartedly on ensuring the safety of not just yourself, but even the people around you, which is where defensive driving comes into play. The thing about committing to your principles is that means nothing can make you change your mind. I think all the time about what would happen if I were to get kidnapped, especially because I know that the FBI is near me. I know that they're monitoring me. I know they're monitoring my family and friends that are also affiliated with this organization that we're providing this seminar through. And I think all the time about what would happen. I think about our ancestors who have had their fingernails ripped off. I think about our ancestors who have been sexually mutilated. I think about our ancestors who were enslaved Africans and were sexually mutilated along with being experimented on. I think about all of that, you all, but here's the thing. Committing to your principles means you are not willing to sell out no matter what. No matter how much pain your body goes through when the oppressor is abusing you, no matter how badly you were beaten, no matter how many bones are broken, no matter how much you have internal bleeding. You know why? Because when you commit to your principles, you understand that your principles are impacting the masses of people, which means you cannot go back on those principles because then you are letting down all those people who practice and believe the same things that you do because you all want to have a better way. You all want to have a better future and you all want to fight for a better future. So as I prepare to close, we are strongly asking you to seriously consider what are your principles? And as you think about some of the ancestors that we've already talked to you about, we have Sekou Touré at the top. We have our comrade Ernesto Che Guevara on the far right with the cigar in his mouth. We have our Comrade Jamu. I know you're going to help me, but I know the first name is Andre. I cannot remember this comrade's last name in the bottom right. On the bottom left, we have our comrade Marilyn Buck, and then of course our two comrades, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and our comrade Malcolm X. And so when we think about these ancestors, they're on this slide for a reason, you all. They are on this slide for a reason. Trust us. They wouldn't have made it if they hadn't contributed in a way that they needed to be recognized. So when we think more about what they've done, we should understand that it's because of them that we're sitting here today. This is why your principles need to help you understand that it's bigger than you, because you shouldn't just have principles that benefit you. If that were the case, then you're not really understanding how humanism works. And there needs to be some adjusting with that. So, sorry, I think capitalist error is getting to me. I apologize. My point is, we need to have a better way of understanding what it means to truly commit. And that's a challenge for some of us, because when things get tough for us, we shed away, we run in fear, we turn the other way, we avoid conflict, we do all those things. I understand that. I used to be like that. But I now understand that that was me internalizing my experiences. And the last thing I'll say is, so because I internalized my own experiences, I wasn't able to think past that in terms of this being bigger than me. Whatever reason I'm running from something, whatever reason I'm turning away, whatever reason I'm feeling fearful about, I need to think about how I had many ancestors who were fearful, many ancestors who wanted to run, many ancestors who didn't even want to leave the plantation, who didn't even want to get on the slave ship. And they resisted because they knew there was something bigger than them, you all. They didn't just think about themselves. The whole reason they wanted to survive was because they knew that there were after generations to come. They needed a better example. They needed a better way of life. And some of our comrades, thankfully, were smart enough to document these experiences, like Malcolm X, like Sekou Touré, so that we could read about them and learn and understand, which brings me back to why increasing our political education is important. And you'll find, if you do the work of increasing your political education, it will inflame and endorse your principles even more stronger than you can imagine. Because you will find that with doing that with your principles, you're enhancing how they can grow. And you are finding that there are more and more people who think just like you. At the end of the day, we all need a little validation, and we all need to feel good about what we're doing. Capitalism will teach you that what you're doing is wrong. But that's why you can't feel in with capitalism. You have to feel in with the comrades we have on the slide, because they will endorse you and affirm for you that what you're doing is right. And more importantly, what humanity needs is right. So with that, we encourage you to do more work on learning about Sekou Odinga. And while you're at it, each one teach one. Pick one person in your life that you can share this information with tomorrow so that the work can continue. Ashe.
Ashe, obrigado, Midasi. And Andre Bluen is the African woman on the bottom right of the screen. She was instrumental in helping the Democratic Party of Guinea, led by Sekou Touré at the top, to reach its independence from France in 1958. And from there, she became a very close advisor to Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected prime minister of the Congo in 1960. And when the CIA sabotaged Lumumba's government, comrade Sister Andre had to flee the Congo for her life. So that's who she is. And we will continue on. I'm like you, excuse me, Shakur, allergic to capitalism, but we'll continue on. So who was Sekou? And Comrade Sekou was born by the slave named Nathaniel Burns. And when he was a young man, he developed a friendship with another African who at that time was named Anthony Costin. And both of these African men were influenced by the brother who was formerly Anthony Costin, his father, who was heavily influenced by the ideas of Malcolm X, and spent time with the young men, helping them articulate and understand those ideas. Eventually, the formerly Nathaniel Burns changed his name to Sekou Odinga, and the formerly Anthony Costin changed his name to Lumumba Shakur, and both became dedicated with the assassination of Malcolm X and the end of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the organization Malcolm X founded in 1964. Both of these Africans decided to become active within the Black Panther Party. But if you know anything about the history of the Black Panther Party, particularly the New York chapter, which is where these Africans were located, it had historically been different than the California Black Panther Party chapters and branches, primarily the headquarters in Oakland, California. The New York chapter had people who were more Pan-Africanist in orientation, more nationalist in orientation, and particularly had a number of people who saw themselves affiliated with the New African Independence Movement, which still exists today, and which is a movement that subscribes to the philosophy that we, as formerly enslaved African people who have fought for who fight for our freedom, should be entitled to land in the U.S. South as our own independent nation. And there are a number of organizations that have represented that philosophical framework: the Republic of New Africa, the New African People's Organization, today, currently, the Malcolm X grassroots movement. There are a number of organizations that agree with that philosophy. And so Sekou Odinga was orientated towards the New African movement and continued to evolve as the Black Panther Party began to decline. Lumumba Shakur was one of the police in New York had informants within the Black Panther Party chapters there, and these police informants set up 21 Black Panther Party members and accused them of committing all of these crimes. And as a result, 21 of them went on trial, and they were all acquitted, with the exception of a couple of them, like Durable Win Wahad, who had to serve long prison sentences for some of these other sketched up crimes that they accused them of. But Lumumba's younger brother, Zaid Shakur, became a leader within the Black Liberation Army as well, after he had served as leadership within the Harlem branch of the Black Panther Party, where Lumumba also participated. And if you know the history, you know that Zaid was in the car on the New Jersey Turnpike in 1973 with Assata Shakur and Sundiata Acoli, that was pulled over by the New Jersey State Troopers, and there was a shootout. Unfortunately, comrade brother Zaid Shakur was killed in that shootout. Sister Assata was, of course, injured. Brother Sundiata Acoli escaped the scene for just a few short days before he was apprehended, and he ended up spending over 4 decades in prison, right? So this is just giving you some quick history of the conditions under which Sekou Odinga emerged. During this time, because of some trumped up charges, once Sekou got word of those charges, he fled New York. They were trying to pin a cop murder on him, so he fled New York and became active in the newly established Black Panther Party international section in Algeria, which was dominated by Eldridge Cleaver of Panthers, especially ones who were escaping these charges here in the U.S., went to Algeria to serve there. Some of the other folks that were there were like Pete O'Neill, who now has the African compound with his wife, Charlotte O'Neill, who was she was here in Sacramento. I was not able to catch her yesterday because I was out of town. They have an African compound in just outside of Arusha, Tanzania, and Pete O'Neill is still a fugitive, quote unquote. They have charges against him that have never been resolved. In fact, Netflix, there was a documentary about Pete O'Neill and Charlotte O'Neill, Panther Africa. You should check that out. I've actually been to their compound and stayed with them in Tanzania. Wonderful place if you ever have plans to go to Tanzania, as you should. But Sekou Odinga ended up spending time in Tanzania as well. And after some time there, he slipped to become a principal leader of that fledgling underground movement that was forming around the decline of the Black Panther Party, 1970, 1971. And you see there, when Sekou Odinga made his physical transition in January of this year, the picture there, which was offered by African Stream, and you know the Shakur statement about the FBI. You know, African Stream is a international African blog that has about 500,000 members, and they have been under attack. They've been prohibited from using all of their platforms. YouTube, they've been prohibited from using Instagram, a number of them, in an effort to silence their voice because they articulate revolutionary Pan-African views. I've been an honored guest on African Stream talking about African-Palestinian solidarity, and so much feedback from I do a number of interviews and shows, and I've never gotten as much as I did after doing that one. So that tells you the threat that they pose to imperialism. But they show you here Brother Sekou Odinga being arrested in the 80s, in the mid 80s. And he ended up doing decades in prison before he was released about 10 years ago. But that's the general perspective of who Sekou Odinga was. But I want to just talk about Sekou as an individual first. This African was a true soldier for justice, a true soldier. And what I mean by true soldier is he was dedicated to the principles of African liberation and never compromised up to his last days, never compromised with that. In other words, he was not one of these Africans that was militant in the 60s and early 70s and then running for office in the 80s and 90s and talking about entrepreneurship and all this BS and that so many people fall into. He didn't join the Mormon church like Eldridge Cleaver. He didn't go any of those Rudy Poot routes. He remained committed to the struggle for African liberation. He was forever committed to the revolutionary struggle in a principled way, including having a commitment to armed struggle to achieve our liberation. And that's important to state because so many people run around here talking about the concept of armed struggle against the U.S. empire and the international capitalist network is insanity. You know, so many people run around here talking about that. But, you know, I think for oppressed people, we're not here to tell you what to think. But what we will say is for oppressed people, everything has to be on the table. And we understand what revolution is. Revolution is not urban rebellions. It's not individual acts. It's the organization of the masses of people. And so when you have that, you have the opportunity to engage struggle in many different ways. And it's not just African people who would engage that, just talking about the US. That's not the only people that would engage that. So this is a question that we need to talk about on a consistent basis and not just accept this narrative that any discussion of anything outside the realm of electoral politics within the capitalist system is absurd. That it's absurd to believe that. Sekou was a committed soldier and never wavered from his principles to revolutionary struggle. And another thing about Comrade Sekou Odinga is his discipline. He had a very disciplined approach to the struggle. And I respect that because I try my hardest to have a very disciplined approach. And by that, what I mean is taking the work very seriously. When you say you're going to do something, you damn well better do it. And not taking the work like, well, whatever happens can happen. And even just his personal approach, like Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga adopted Islam and became a fervent practitioner of Islam. And for him, that didn't mean some kind of escapism religion, but it meant having a faith that would further fortify his commitment to the African revolution and to justice for all peace and justice-loving people all over the planet Earth. And that, to me, is exactly how faith should be used. Faith shouldn't be used as a substitute for a drug or for alcohol. just to give you an escape from dealing with the problems of the real world, because that's how a lot of people use it. It should be used to strengthen you to engage the struggle on a consistent basis. And I respect the way Comrade Brother Sekou did that and organized his life. You know, you wouldn't find Comrade Odinga in a bar getting drunk. And I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but I think if you're engaged in this revolutionary life, I don't see how you can be doing that. I don't do it. And that's the reason why I don't do it. I don't see how you can be doing that. You got to be alert and spending time to get your mind and body right. I'm not saying you can't have fun, but you certainly can't be spending a lot of your time with a bunch of nonsense like that. And he didn't believe in that. And unfortunately, and I'm not going to name names because I don't want to, you need to do the work and find out who I'm talking about. But there are a lot of people that deserve our respect because of their contributions. But many of them that were existing within these circles we're talking about had a lot of problems with addiction and all those things that really, in many instances, I would argue, stunted their logic and caused people to get hurt and killed and incarcerated. So I respect Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga's approach, because I think that's the approach when we're engaged in serious struggle that we have to, it has to be disciplined. And that discipline was borne out in the work that Comrade Sekou engaged in. They were engaged in acts of expropriation, is what we call them. In other words, they robbed banks. They robbed armored trucks to get money to finance the movement work. And you might hear that and say, oh, that's criminal. No, what's criminal is they stole this whole hemisphere from the indigenous people. If they hadn't done that and stole millions of Africans and brought us here to work for them without any pay, without any kind of plausible work conditions to build up their wealth and their empire, that's criminal. Because if none of those things would happen, we would have never been in a position to rob your damn banks. You wouldn't even have had any banks. Since the entire banking system was based on seed money provided by the transatlantic slave trade, you wouldn't even have had no, so it wouldn't even have happened, right? So don't come to us with that foo-foo, booty mouth bullshit about, oh, it's a crime that they robbed banks. They took the money back that was stolen. Every bank wouldn't be here without enslaving our ancestors. So all they did was take a small percentage of that back. But the way that Comrade Sekou organized these expropriations, and there were dozens of them, where thousands of dollars were expropriated, and no one got hurt. No one was injured in the expropriations that he organized because of the commitment he had to detail and discipline and the humanist nature in which he approached his work. He wasn't somebody that was he wasn't a thug trying to hurt people. They were trying to achieve an objective to win resources for the African Revolution. And he was able to do that. And probably one of the best examples of his discipline and his principled commitment to the work was his role in helping Assata Shakur escape prison. He was a part of the entire process to do that, was one of the instrumental organizers of the planning of the escape. A number of us in the movement, we've known that for years, but we don't speak about that until he's no longer physically here. I mean, he went to prison for 30 plus years because they convicted him for his role in these things. But we haven't talked about it because if you don't have enough interest to study it for yourself, then you don't need to know. It's that old saying, those that know, those that don't know, or however that, you know what I'm trying to say. You don't need to know until you do the work. So now that he's no longer physically here, we can say that he was a proud organizer of that activity. And it didn't go perfect because when you're engaged in work, things are not going to be perfect. But they had enough planning. They started planning almost a year in advance. And they communicated with Comrade Sister Assata. And everybody knew their role. It wasn't like a lot of us today where our egos get in the way and we plan something, we come 55 minutes late because, nobody's more important then whatever we think we got to do, which is usually 99.9% of the time, is not a damn thing worth anything. But they didn't function like that, because you cannot function like that engaged in serious work. And when I see that with people, when I see people that are not consistent, show that kind of indiscipline, I won't even deal with you. I won't even deal with you if you're like that, because you're telling me you're not serious, and I don't want to waste time, because this work is important. So once people do that, like people like, man, I haven't heard from you, and you won't hear from me because you're not serious. You're playing games. And I respect the way that Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga approached this work, particularly with Assata Shakur. When I used to go and visit Marilyn Buck, who was on the previous slide, and Shakur went to visit her with me, I'd go to see her as often as I could, because she was in a federal women's prison not far from here. And she was also convicted for her role in Assata Shakur's escape. And they formed a group called the Friends. They were white women, her and another woman, Sylvia Balladini, and the other women who had come out of the white left movement, the Weather Underground, Students for a Democratic Society, that element. And Marilyn used to tell me when I would visit her that Sekou Odinga was when she came and offered her services, he's grilled her for hours. And this is that discipline. Grilled her like most of you wouldn't even been able to stand up to the grilling. Your feelings would have been hurt. Why is he talking to me like that? You would have quit the struggle and went to become an entrepreneur, because you wasn't serious about it in the first place. But this is the respect that Sekou Odinga showed towards our movement for liberation. And I just got through reading a book that talked about his contributions, and a lot of people's contributions during this era, written by this racist European. And I read books like that all the time, because I like to be able to read the book and deconstruct their lives as I'm reading it. That's why I have such a critical mind. You should try it sometimes. But even in that book, even the book that racist cracker wrote, and I'll tell you what the book is, because you should check it out. It's called Days of Rage by Brian Burrow, America's Radical Underground, the FBI, and the Forgotten Age of Revolutionary Violence. So what this cracker attempts to do is paint a picture that all of these folks like Sekou Odinga, Marilyn Buck, Mutulu Shakur, etc., the Weather Underground, all of these folks, Twyman Myers, he talks about Twyman Myers, who was in his early 20s, a soldier for the Black Liberation Army. And Twyman Myers probably was responsible for shooting and killing at least 4 or 5 police in New York City, if not a couple more. And so, people like this guy, this author, painting like he's a terrorist, a thug, a gang member. And, if Twyman Myers was a gang member, if Sekou Odinga was a gang member, then George Washington was a gang member, because they didn't do anything that George Washington did. So if you sit your white ass up there and talk about, oh, this is a democratic country because of the work of George Washington, then understand we're going to raise up our heroes and say that our heroes have the right to fight our enemies, just like you perceive your heroes having the right to fight your enemies. We are not on the same page. So to us, Twyman Myers was not a thug. Twyman Myers was a hero, was a revolutionary. I don't give a damn what you think about us saying that, because our people have a right to be free. And this is the point about someone like Sekou. And I brought up the cracker that wrote the book, because even where he wrote about Sekou Odinga in the book, he had to do that in a respectful way, because even the cracker had respect for Brother Odinga's discipline and his principled commitment, even though the cracker made it clear 30,000 times in the book that he didn't agree with the politics, but he had to respect the approach. And I'm saying that's all that matters, is respect. And Sekou's complete willingness to put his personal safety and life on the line in favor of actions to advance our struggle. he was consistent with that, with these expropriations, clearly breaking into a maximum facility prison to rescue one of our people. And, you know, Assata Shakur ended up in Cuba, where she remains today. And Sekou Odinga is no longer with us and spent 33 years in prison for his role. He didn't gain any personal benefit from his work around Assata Shakur. I know that's impossible for a lot of folks to comprehend, because if you don't have any personal benefit in what you do, you're not doing it. And that is a crime. That kind of thinking is a crime. And the reason why it's a crime, especially for oppressed people, is because you would not have any opportunities to do anything. We were enslaved. We were colonized. We didn't have any opportunities. And if you're in Africa and you're no longer in a colonized reality, at least in a domestic colony, you're in a neo-colonial situation, but you have the opportunity to go to college, gain skills. If you're in the Western Hemisphere, Canada, the United States, any of these other countries, and you have those same opportunities, it is only because of one reason. It's because somebody like Sekou Odinga sacrificed so that you can be put in a position to reap those benefits. And the reason why these folks sacrificed is because they knew we had to have freedom, even if they knew they weren't going to have it. And Sekou Odinga went to prison. He didn't have any freedom, but they knew we had to have it as a people. So they made the ultimate sacrifice. And while they make all these real life sacrifices, your cowardly ass is sitting in some church somewhere today talking about Jesus made the sacrifice. You couldn't make the sacrifice. Jesus made. It's all kind of our people who made the sacrifice. You're just too lazy to learn about them. That's all. Stop doing that. I was in a church once and they said that I got up and heckled and they made me leave. I was there with somebody. And that's why I can't go in those places, because if I can't listen to that stuff and not challenge it, because I'm not a coward like so many of these people out here. How could Jesus made the sacrifice? What kind of sacrifice did Jesus make that Sekou Odinga didn't make? That Malcolm X didn't make? What kind of I need someone to explain that to me. I'm not anti-Jesus. I'm pro-truth. Okay, so I need someone to explain that to me, because what I hear you saying is that you're just a damn coward and you're trying to find some way to justify it. And that's not gonna ride with us, because we know too much about people like this comrade brother we're talking about right now, Sekou Odinga, who made too much of a sacrifice for us to sit here and listen to your cowardice. So this is why we respect.
Comrade John, I'm not able to hear you currently, comrade. It might just be me. Can you do a test for me real quick? No, no, I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me?
Wait, I just
No.
heard something. Yeah, now I can. Thank you.
Okay, it just switched on its own. I didn't switch anything. That's the police. I didn't touch anything. It just switched on its own. So we want to talk about Sekou the warrior as we close out. It was Sekou's dedication to detailed planning, as I mentioned, and execution that led to the almost perfectly implemented operation to liberate Assata Shakur, as we mentioned, on November 2nd of 1979. The commemoration is coming up in a couple of weeks. And an example of Sekou's discipline was his political grilling of Marilyn Buck, which I mentioned, before accepting her as a comrade in plans like the execution of Assata's escape. And their inclusion of these European women, these white women, was genius. It would have probably been much more difficult for them to succeed in the Assata escape plan without that, because the car that they used, the police were looking for African men because that's who drove it into the prison. And when the police pulled over a car that matched the description, they got this white woman driving it. And so that threw them off. and they would have, that would have been much more difficult to carry out. And this was, again, the degree of their planning. And I'm saying this because a lot of you all, you're like, well, we can't defeat them. We can't do that. We can do anything. If we take the time and effort and commitment and plan it, we can do anything. They're not undefeatable. They're not invincible or invulnerable. They're very easy to be defeated. And they illustrate that by the actions they take against our work. All we're doing right now is educating people, and they take actions against their work. I don't know how my microphone just flipped off or not. I know I didn't do it. And I know what's happening to African Stream is another example of their efforts to silence. They clearly are concerned about the work that we're doing. So that's for those of you who think that we're just a blip on the map and there's nothing we can do to them. That's the biggest weapon they have is their ability to make you believe that. That's why we do the work we do, to challenge that. Today, Assata Shakur is free in socialist Cuba, but Sekou Odinga served 33 years until he got a compassion release a few years ago. And as we mentioned, he made his physical transition in January of 2024. I had the privilege and honor to meet Sekou Odinga in 2018. And I had known about this African since I was a very young man. I think that someone told me about him. I went to an event where they talked about him. I don't think that I had any literature that talked about him that I read, but I knew about him. And I told him when I met him at Marcus Books in 2018, I told him that I've known about him since I was a very young man. And I told him, there's no way I could ever do anything to thank you enough for the sacrifices you made for our people. And saying that to him made me get emotional, because I'm not cynical like a lot of these people out here. I see someone make a contribution, it means something to me. It means everything to me. And so when I did that, he got emotional. And the brother that was with him that brought him there, he got emotional. And we just stood there hugging and holding on to each other for a few moments before we left. But I just want to say that I think that it's important for me, the best thing I can do, and I felt this in 2010 when Marilyn Buck died. I mean, it was a really big blow to me because she had become really like an auntie to me. I used to visit her often, and she knew all my personal life, and she wanted to know, and we talked about everything, and it's hard to find someone you can talk to like that. And I just had so much respect for her. And when we lost her in 2010, it was very difficult for me. And I decided the best thing I could do to honor her was to continue to let people know about her contributions. And so I've done that since 2010. So much so that for a while in Portland, there was an organization inspired by the information that I was spreading about her that named a European organization that named themselves after her. I can't even remember, Marilyn Buck Abolitionist Collective, I believe it was. I don't even think they're in operation now, but I did my part. And I think the point is that with people like Marilyn and like Sekou Odinga, that's my commitment, is to make sure people know of their outstanding example. Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga maintained his commitment to revolutionary struggle until his death. So we don't want to hear anything about, oh, we can't win against them. No, you can't win because you've already sold out. There are a number of us who refuse to sell out. And my wife told me the other day, she said, you read for information, I read for pleasure. And I explained to her that, no, I read, I get a lot of information. I'm a voracious reader. I'm reading all the time. But when I read about someone like Sekou Odinga, that's the highest pleasure for someone like me, because it inspires me. And that's exciting to know that we can win, that we can beat these beasts. That's exciting to me. So there's nothing more pleasurable than that. I'm reading a book right now about Louise Little, Malcolm X's mother, and it's just so inspiring what she went through after the state completely sabotaged her lifestyle and took her children away. Just a high beacon of honor and dignity for our people, where that woman never wavered in her commitment to that dignity. And that inspires me. That makes me a happy person, because I know what we're capable of. Despite of what you might see around us that's telling us we're not capable of, I know better. And if you engage in this struggle on a serious level, you'll know better too. And that's what we need, you all. We need to be inspired. And I would argue, I only talked to Comrade Brother Sekou Odinga for a few minutes, but the energy that I got from him there tells me that the sacrifices he made them because he wanted us to see it that way, that we should be inspired by his sacrifice. I know that's why they engaged in the action with Assata Shakur. I know that's why they did that. We should be inspired. And I'll be damned if I'm not going to make sure that happens. And you should too. So we want to thank you for joining us today. And we want to invite you back next week, October 27th. We're going to do a very interesting and different program. We're going to talk about African folks and international travel, and really all working people, but talking about how difficult it is for working people to travel internationally, how seldom it happens. And the fact that it seldom happens has a lot to do with why so many of us are so confused about so many things. So we're going to talk about that next week. So we invite you to join us. The QR code in the upper left-hand corner, we have AAPRP programs in there other than this one, including this one, but other than this one. Forward Ever Shop to buy revolutionary African clothing. We invite you to do that. Hood Communists, we invite you to check them out. Wonderful Pan-African blog. You can join the AAPRP at aaprp-intl.org. So check out the website and do that. Contribute to the AAPRP at Venmo at A-AAPRP and PayPal at AAPRP no dash. And the bottom right QR code, Burkina Books, one of our projects. If you had a chance, we had a webinar yesterday, Haiti and Pan-Africanism. We had Pierre Lebrassier from the Haiti Action Committee. We had Comrade Brother Sebukwe Shakura from the AAPRP in Kenya, East Africa, and Comrade Sister Inem Richardson from AAPRP Burkina Faso. So go to Burkina Books, bottom right-hand corner, and support the work that we're doing in Burkina Faso. And buy my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. I heard from someone else today, I didn't know, they talked about how the book inspires them. That's what we have to do, y'all, is inspire people. You don't have to write a book, but tell them about my book. You know, tell them about some other book. If you don't like me, tell them about some book. Tell them about the Louise Little book. Tell them about some book. Tell them about Assata. Tell them about something that's going to give them some energy to want to believe we can win. That's what we need right now. That's our primary role. That's what all of us should be doing. And if you're not talking to anybody, you're serving the interests of our enemy. And unless you're geared and focused on doing that, we assume that's not what you want to do. So let's get busy. Have a great rest of your day. Forward ever, backwards never.